Hello and welcome to the van build vlog. I start with an apology. In all the excitement, some might say stress, of doing it, I entirely forgot to film myself cutting the hole in the gas locker, which is the gas vent, again down to outside. I think this is the last of the major holes I'm cutting in the floor of the van, and there'll be this little vent thing, which you can't really see, there we go, in that hole, and also the gas filler pipe from the LPG filler hole in the bumper will come up through that hole, and the cylinder goes here where you can see all the marks. I'm a little disappointed with this gas locker. This was a properly purchased official gas locker, you know, supposed to be gas safe. Bought it from Gaslow, and having drilled holes in it and put the regulator in and stuff, so I can't return it, I noticed while cutting the hole that at the back here, where that join is, there is a gap. There was light coming out the other side. The bottom plate has a lip up on the outside, and there's a millimetre or so gap between that fold up and the back plate. So in other words, gas could technically escape up there. So for a gas safe locker, I'm not terribly impressed. And in fact, when it was delivered to me, the door that goes on here was bent slightly, and it's soft enough metal I could bend it back to straight again, but not terribly impressed. So what I'm going to do is put a load of sealant gunge all around the edges inside, and probably on the back as well outside. And the gas should, I mean, there shouldn't be any leaking gas to start with, but in the off chance that there is, it should prefer to go down the hole rather than working its way up the crack through the sealant. So I think that will be fine. And peering underneath the van now, you can see it's turning into a veritable Swiss cheese. That many holes, the two heater holes, air inlet and exhaust outlet at the bottom there. The new hole into the locker, and the one in the top right corner is the one under the hob unit. Any gas that hangs around after this many holes, well, deserves a round of applause, frankly. Meanwhile, in terms of the actual gas pipework, I have started installing this myself, though I do still intend getting it checked by a gas certified professional. So let me just briefly show you. This is going to be a little bit awkward. This, here we go, this pipe here is part of the hob unit, and it ends here. So I have put on this joiny thing. These are all compression fittings, they're not soldered. That's confused the camera, there we go. So that copper pipe then goes over there and over to that isolation valve which I've put in, so that if I need to, I can turn the hob off from the rest of the system. And then it goes under there to a T-piece. So from the T it goes up round to another little isolator, and then down to the input on the gas heater. So again, I can isolate the heater separately if I need to. Originally this wasn't going to come up that way. I was going to have it go down, as it would have been a less of a tight turn, but going down would have meant wrapping it underneath the exhaust pipe from the heater. And even though it's got this exhaust wrap around it, I didn't want a gas pipe going anywhere near the exhaust pipe, so I decided to bring it up instead, and it keeps the pipe shorter as well. So out of the T, round and in is about as short as you can get. As you can see, I haven't done the final connection between the T and into the gas locker. There's the hole, and onto the regulator, because I want to get a rubber grommet to go in that hole with an 8mm centre for the pipe. And trying to find anywhere that sells one rubber grommet of exactly the right size is proving quite troublesome, but I've had a tip off on Twitter, so hopefully I will get one, and then I can put that final connection in. And then that will be the gas pipework installed and ready for testing. Now while we're up this end of the van, let me also just show you this, the little white box. That is a combined propane, butane, basically LPG detector, and carbon monoxide detector, and apparently it detects knockout gas, because there are reports of people having knockout gas spewed into their vehicle by ne'er-do-wells. who then rob them. Anyway, that detects the whole lot. And I put it down there because its main function for me is as an LPG detector, and obviously LPG, heavier than air, it would sink down. And if it was going to detect any, that's going to detect anything coming out of the join from the T-piece, and also potentially anything coming out from the hob. It's not totally on the floor, because as you can see there's a little white lead coming out of the bottom of it. That's the 12-volt supply, so it couldn't go flat on the floor. And in fact the manufacturers suggest you mount it 30 centimetres off the floor, but I presume that's in a bigger installation than a camper van. So I'm quite happy with that. It is also a carbon monoxide detector, as I say, and again, if the heater unit decided to start spewing out carbon monoxide, if for example the exhaust pipe became disconnected, then this whole cupboard would be the first place to start filling up with fumes, so that's not a bad place for a carbon monoxide detector. But I'm also going to have within the body of the van a second carbon monoxide detector and a smoke alarm. So in total I'll have 2 carbon monoxides, a smoke alarm and an LPG alarm, and I think really that should be sufficient. Let us turn to the electrics. As you'll know from previous vlogs, the main bulk of the electric cables come up through this hole ending here, and you can just see here this black thing. That is my leisure battery, and it is a 160 amp hour AGM, and I like AGMs because I've got them in the boat and because they don't vent gases and you don't have to top them up, and you can actually put them at any angle. They can even go sideways if you want, because it's all some sort of sticky gel stuff inside instead of liquid acid and water. So it's a safer sort of battery, I think, and they can deal with high currents. Not that there's going to be any high currents in the van, but that's where it's going. I realise it is not tied down or clamped down or anything like that at the moment. I've literally got the battery just yesterday and popped it in there for the moment, and this is where it's going to be, so that it is next to where all these wires come up, and the wires are going to go into this new box that I have built with the same stained varnish top and the same painted front and the little pull-off cover, which is on quite strong magnets. So my electrical items are going to go in this box. I'm not very happy with my construction of this box. It's very crude. It's 12mm ply all round, and as you can see, loads of wood glued and screwed to hold it all together. It's come out rather more crude than I'd hoped, but I think it's going to do the job. So in there I'm going to put the solar charge controller, the mains charge controller, the incoming mains RCD and trip switches, and at the bottom the inverter, plus all the 12-volt fuses and all the wiring joining that lot together. Now that's not quite where it's going. It's going to go a little bit more that way and a little more in the back, but I can't do that at the moment without feeding all the wires through. But I think you get the gist that it'll go there, and if I need to access anything from within the van, I just pull that front off and fiddle with it. There's a main 12-volt switch there. Again, that's not wired to anything at the moment, but that's where it's going. And then the hole in the side here is how I get the wires from the battery through and into the box. On the back of the box I've drilled a load of holes for air to come in at the bottom, and then I've also drilled that slot for hot air to come out at the top, because electronic stuff does get hot. Incidentally, the 2 flat long cardboard boxes sitting on the bed are 100-watt solar panels, but that's for another video. I moaned before about Victron's silly design on the inverter, but this is the mains charger, and look how silly this is. This is the mains lead, and there's somewhere you're supposed to put a screwdriver to screw that screw in, with this in the way. And it doesn't matter how much of this you do, you can't get to it. Why did they drop the lead out here in front of the mounting point? Daft. And a couple of hours later, that is all the main components installed, but they are not wired up yet, so I need to go and get a lot of cables, connect all this lot together, and then I will talk about what I've done and why. But I'm pretty pleased with that so far. And here it is, pretty much all wired up, although the solar panels aren't actually on the roof and plugged into the solar charger yet, but most things are wired. It might look like a bit of a tangle, but there is actually quite a bit of order in this chaos. I'll just point out what the things are. That's the inverter, solar charger, mains battery charger. That's the incoming mains consumer unit, which has, you probably can't see it, but there's an RCD and 2 MCB circuit breakers in there. One circuit breaker, 6 amp, feeds the charger. The 16 amp one will feed a socket that, again, a main socket that I haven't yet wired. Now through that hole is the battery. Just on the other side, I don't even know if you can see it. Is it there? There it is. There's the battery. And again, you can see loads of wires coming off the terminals there. They basically feed through that hole in ducting like this. So the solar charger wires directly to the battery, the mains charger wires directly to the battery, then the output from the battery comes through on the back of this. There's a switch here, so I can isolate the whole 12 volt system, the outgoing 12 volt system if you like, because the chargers would remain connected. Anyway, comes out of there and onto a switch. No, I lie. I'm going to start that again. So it comes through here, the main output of the battery, and through a 100 amp fuse, that is the overall fuse for the entire system. Then it goes through the big red switch that turns the whole lot off, and there are 2 feeds off that, one going to the inverter via a separate 70 amp fuse, and then one going off to the bottom of the 12 volt distribution with a 30 amp fuse, and then out of the 30 amp fuse into this distribution box, which, as you can see, has lots of little terminals on it going off to all the different things, and those go off to the switches. And then the switches are things like the front lights and the rear lights. Ignore that one, there's something separate going there that I haven't received yet, and the fridge and so on. Bottom one turns the inverter on or off, but that's a direct switch into the inverter. And then those wires disappear off, down and round and back down to all the different devices. Meanwhile, all the negatives come up and into the bus bar here. And then that bus bar in turn goes off to the battery, and the battery is also connected to the chassis, and everything is fused within an inch of its life. As I say, you've got the main 100 amp fuse on the incoming, then you've got a 70 on the inverter, then you've got a 30 feeding the main individual fuse box, and then each of those circuits is fused as well. And that seems to be the main thing with circuitry, is fuse the hell out of it. The output of the main charger to the battery and also the output of the solar charger to the battery don't have inline fuses because those devices have fuses in them already. Most of the things have switches. The propane and carbon monoxide alarm that I showed you in either the last or the last but one video, that is simply wired straight to the circuit, so it can't be turned off unless you turn the whole 12 volt system off. That's so that it can't be accidentally turned off. And that pretty much is it. Now I've plugged it all in and it works. Everything runs. And I've got the income. Oh, I should show you the incoming main, shouldn't I? All these wires into the fuse box come down the side here. And down there, which you may not be able to see, there's one that disappears down through the floor. And it comes out in my underbody mains hookup. Now I know what you're thinking, an underbody means I'll have to grovel around in the mud and the rain if it's, you know, horrid outside to connect that, but that's fine. I didn't want it on the side or back of the van being visible. I wanted it hidden, and I'm quite happy with it there. And as you can see, it's got a little flappy lid over it to stop any water and splashes going up there, so I think it'll be fine.